Gravitas, live and direct from WION Studios in New York.
Hello and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. It's 9 p.m. in India, 11:30 a.m. here in New York. Today's show is our final one from the US for now. New York, we know, is the financial capital of the US, the city of the Wall Street. And today we'll focus on developments halfway across the world that will have repercussions not just on the Wall Street, but on financial markets across the globe. We're talking about the financial pandemic that is brewing in China, the Evergrande crisis. It's a story we've been tracking for the past 2 weeks. And with every passing day, I can tell you, the crisis is ballooning. Evergrande has now begun missing its payments. Creditors do not know what's happening to their money. Evergrande has borrowed from hundreds of banks, and now these banks are not sure if they'll get their money back. Plus, there are more than 1 million home buyers who put a down payment on an Evergrande apartment. They haven't got their homes, and they may not get their money either. In other words, millions of people stand to lose their life savings. Like I said, it's a crisis, one that the Communist Party is failing to solve. So what do? What they do best: crack down. The government of China is cracking down on protesters and censoring criticism. The same playbook that was used to hide the Wuhan virus outbreak is now being used to crush the Evergrande protest. Today we'll tell you how China is trying to hide a financial contagion. Also on the show this Monday, more trouble brewing in China. Hundreds of factories and homes are going dark. We'll tell you why. Britain's fuel shortage is getting worse. Boris Johnson could call in the army now to supply petrol. In Germany, the ruling CDU has suffered a narrow defeat in the election. We'll tell you who will lead Germany after Angela Merkel. And our pro-democracy voices of Myanmar being muzzled at the United Nations. Myanmar's ambassador was denied a chance to address world leaders at the General Assembly. We'll get you a report. First, as always, Gravitas Global Headlines.
Hours after Myanmar's envoy withdrew from UNGA speaker list following an agreement between US, China and Russia, now the UN says Afghanistan has also withdrawn from speaking at the UNGA. Turkish President Erdogan says he expects the government in Afghanistan to be inclusive before any agreement can be made about operating Kabul's strategic airport. After a narrow election victory, SPD Chancellor candidate Olaf Scholz says he slept well last night and hopes that a new German government will be in place by Christmas by forming a coalition with Greens and the FDP. Australia's New South Wales government unveiled a roadmap for reopening the state from COVID-19 shutdowns, detailing the different levels of freedoms to be afforded to citizens based on their vaccination status. The state has started to ease restrictions, allowing construction sites to return to full capacity and outdoor swimming pools to reopen with social distancing measures in place. Armenians marched in thousands to commemorate the Nagorno-Karabakh war victims. Ex-President Robert Kocharyan held the march along with opposition parties just a day before the conflict's first anniversary. Iceland falls short of women majority. A recount of votes in the Iceland election have dashed the hopes of an all-women parliament, as per the state TV. The number of women representatives were reduced to 30 seats after the recount, which means there will be more men than women in the parliament. Officials in Thailand have warned that monsoon rains may extend flooding that has already badly affected 27 provinces, almost a third of the country's total. New lava flows from the erupting volcano in the Canary Islands and enters the town of Tuduk, destroying homes and buildings. So far, 430 buildings have been destroyed and 6,000 people evacuated from the Spanish island of La Palma. The United States have regained the Ryder Cup with a record 19-9 victory over Europe at Whistling Straits. The hosts started Sunday's singles with an 11-5 lead, and wins for Bryson DeChambeau, Patrick Cantlay and Scottie Scheffler put them on the brink of the title. Colin Morikawa clinched the trophy by halving his round against Victor Hovland, and the US would go on to record 4 more wins for the largest victory margin in Ryder Cup history. Team Europe have been crowned Laver Cup champions for the fourth consecutive time after a dominant 14-1 triumph over Team World in Boston. Alexander Zverev and Andrei Rublev beat Felix Auger-Aliassime and Riley Opelka 6-2, 6-7, 10-3 in Sunday's opening doubles to clinch the title. The Europeans boasted 6 of the world's top 8 players and lost only 1 of the 9 matches contested over 3 days. Gravitas, live and direct from WION Studios in New York.
Tonight I would like to begin with a video. This is China's Kunming city. The pictures are from August this year. On your screen are 15 high-rise buildings. All of them are unfinished apartments. For 8 years, these 15 buildings have just stood here. The developer ran out of money, so the apartments were never really completed. Chinese authorities finally woke up last month. They planted 85,000 bombs, 85,000 bombs, and decided to blow up everything. Onlookers were heard screaming when that happened. These dramatic pictures will now become a common sight in China. More unfinished buildings will be blown up by authorities. Imagine what this does to people who put their life savings in these apartments. Why are Chinese authorities doing this? Because China's property bubble is starting to burst. And why should you worry about this? Because the whole world is going to feel the shockwaves. Almost 2 years back, remember, China exported a pandemic and covered up its mistakes. The world felt the impact. It's still feeling the impact. Now, a financial crisis is brewing in China, and the Communist Party is trying to cover that up too. Tonight, we'll show you how they're doing it. Almost 10 days back, we told you about Evergrande, the world's most indebted property developer. It owes more than $300 billion to its creditors in China and around the world. But Evergrande does not have the money to pay back these loans. 2 weeks back, creditors began lining up outside the company offices to get their money back. Some even tried to commit suicide. They were desperate. They wanted to get their life savings back. Now their worst fears are coming true. Evergrande has begun missing its payments. Last week, the company failed to make an interest payment on a bond. It was supposed to pay $83.5 million. The deadline was Thursday. It did not happen. Evergrande did not have the money to pay. The company has secured a 30-day grace period to make the payment now. But what happens if it fails to pay back? A default will be declared. And that's very much a possibility. The bondholders do not know if they'll get their payment. Who are these bondholders? Many of them are average Chinese citizens. If Evergrande defaults, they will all lose their life savings. Their wealth is going to be wiped out, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. The fallout of Evergrande's collapse would be far-reaching. The company owes money to more than 171 domestic banks and 121 other financial firms. And they all fear defaults. Evergrande is on the brink of a collapse. If the company declares bankruptcy, it will lead to a collapse of the financial system in China. The future of the Chinese economy is at stake, and this is not an exaggeration. So what is being done about Evergrande? Well, China has largely been silent about the crisis, but behind the scenes it is resorting to censorship and crackdowns to contain the damage. China used the same tools to hide its mistakes during the pandemic, and now the Communist Party is deploying the same tactics to hide a financial contagion. Local governments are issuing notices. They want Communist Party officials and companies to look out for any protests. Officials have been asked to watch angry citizens like aggrieved home buyers or unpaid contractors, even former staffers of Evergrande who were laid off. Why are these people being tracked? Well, we found the answer to this question in a directive from the Housing Department in Lingshan County. Let me quote from it. This is what it says. Follow the demand to spot them early, diffuse early, control early, and deal with early. The heads of property development firms must personally take in hand the work of dealing with petitions and maintaining stability. Now, Chinese officials fear the protests could get out of hand, so they want local officers to nip them in the bud. In the meantime, Beijing is trying to keep the markets afloat. Last week, China's central bank pumped $71 billion into the financial system. This extra money is supposed to calm the investors, give the message that there is enough money to keep the banking system afloat. This is like using Band-Aid to fix a wound that needs surgery. How long can China prop up the markets? Cash injections help in the short term. They might hide the symptoms of distress for a while, but they will never be able to treat the malaise of Chinese economy. The fact is that there is a real estate bubble in China. It is fueled by debt and kept afloat by money that does not really exist. The Evergrande crisis is just the beginning. The actual crisis is much bigger. As of 2018, 50 million homes, 50 million homes were lying vacant in China. These apartments and houses were built but found no buyers. And China, has many ghost cities, acres of concrete with no takers. According to one assessment, there is enough empty property in China to house more than 90 million people. And I'll put that figure in perspective for you. There are enough empty homes in China to fit in populations of 5 G7 countries. Citizens from France, Germany, Italy, the UK and Canada, they can all fit into the empty apartments of China. So there are millions of homes lying empty. There are no buyers. What do you think will happen to the developers who built these properties? Sooner or later, they will default, just like Evergrande. Investment banking firm UBS has released an assessment. It says there are at least 10 developers in China today who face the risk of defaults. So there could be more Evergrandes in the near future. China's real estate sector is like a house of cards at the moment. The world should brace for its collapse. Evergrande is not just a company. It's a case study, an example of everything wrong with the Chinese economy, whether it's borrowing on steroids, lack of transparency, or apathy from the leadership. This isn't just an Evergrande problem. This is a China problem. You could see it next in the energy industry. A major crisis is unfolding there too. Chinese factories are going dark. Families are being asked to ration electricity. Simply put, China is running out of power. How did that happen? How does a wannabe superpower not have electricity? Well, two broad reasons. Number one is market forces. Coal and gas prices are going through the roof and Chinese factories cannot keep up. They can't keep buying fuel at these exorbitant prices. And reason number two, China is trying to meet emission goals. Now, this is a strange tactic. We can all get behind climate action. We all agree that pollution must be reduced. But is this the best way? You can't simply turn off the lights at factories or leave families in the dark. That's not what climate action means. You have to build alternatives like solar plants, like wind farms. Only then can you ration coal and oil. But China is doing the opposite. Let me tell you why. Half the regions in China have missed their climate goals. They're emitting too much. So what does Beijing do? Shut the tap, crack down on energy consumption. China will hold the Winter Olympics next year, and Xi Jinping wants clear skies. He doesn't want us to see the smog, or the dust storms, or the smoke gushing out from factories. So basically, he's trying to ban pollution. Well, good luck with that. The Evergrande story is hiding the true extent of the power crisis. In Jiangsu province, steel mills have been closed. Some cities there are turning off street lights. In Zhejiang, 160 companies have been closed. In Liaoning, 14 cities have ordered power cuts. There are reports of traffic lights being turned off. Remember, we're talking about the world's second largest economy, a country that wants to lead the world. They can't even keep their street lights on. For the Chinese, this crisis is just getting started. As they say, winter is coming. You need power to heat homes, to run generators, but there is none available, or not enough. Chinese families are being asked to use natural light. They're going through power cuts. Not ideal when temperatures can fall to 0 degrees. Of course, the Chinese leadership could not care less. They're not worried about their people. They're worried about their precious economy. No factories means no output, and no output means economic contraction. That's where China is headed. Experts say the Chinese economy will contract in the final quarter of 2021, and this slowdown is likely to spill over. Major Chinese factories are reporting a fall in output. For example, suppliers to Apple and Tesla have shut their operations. Multiple companies have informed the stock exchange of this slowdown. We're talking about a wide supply chain from aluminium to textiles to microchips and soybeans. All these commodities are in short supply and not to mention way too expensive now. This will affect multinational companies. Some of them produce entirely in China. Others are dependent on parts and raw materials from China. We saw this last year as well. The Wuhan virus arrived, so China locked down entire cities and provinces. No warning, no announcements. The entire supply chain broke down. 1 year later, we are seeing a repeat. Another opaque policy, another opaque shutdown. You could see higher prices, shortages, lesser profits for multinationals. It's like a chain reaction, you see, all because of one toxic link. So how do you fix this link? It's not like China does not have options. For example, import coal. China can buy foreign coal to meet the shortage. But there's a problem. China's biggest coal supplier is Australia. And they are in the middle of a trade war with Australia. Beijing has halted all energy shipments from Australia. And this is precisely the problem. The Chinese model of balancing growth and climate action is a failure because there's no transparency, there is no accountability, and from the looks of it, there is no planning. China wants to market itself as a climate leader, but it's not willing to put in the work. Meanwhile, in the United Kingdom, the fuel shortage is going from bad to worse. Thousands of petrol stations are dry. Why is that? Because the Great Britain does not have enough drivers to transport fuel, and the crisis has become so big that British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is expected to now call in the army to transport the fuel and tackle the shortage. Here's a report.
The lines outside British fuel pumps just keep getting longer. The British government denies that there is a fuel shortage in the country. But these signs tell a different story. On Monday, up to 90% of British stations across major English cities had no fuel. British citizens are getting frustrated with the wait.
I've literally been waiting for petrol for 3 days. Like all weekend I've had no petrol, literally on zero, but we've been driving around trying to get him to school and trying to get petrol at the same time.
It's ridiculous, you know. I've just turned up, going to work normally, got 20 miles of fuel left, just can't get any in Milton Keynes where I actually live. Come down here, you've just got to get in the queue now, haven't you?
Politicians are urging motorists to stop panic buying petrol, saying there simply is no shortage of fuel, and there has been some shortages to HGV drivers. Now that's heavy goods vehicle, and they have a different license from the regular driver's license, and that has been the issue.
The crisis could be here to stay, unless the Johnson government decides to call in the army. London is seriously considering this plan. It is called Operation Escalin. Under this, hundreds of soldiers could be drafted from the British forces. They'll drive a reserve fleet of 80 tankers and supply fuel to the stations. Already, trainers from the British Ministry of Defence have been called in to accelerate training of drivers. The British government has taken more steps. Competition rules for the fuel industry have been lifted. A new visa program has been announced. The UK will give 5,000 visas to foreign truckers who can transport fuel tankers and food. But those decisions might take weeks to deliver. The opposition says the government isn't doing enough.
And I'm astonished that the government, knowing the situation, is not acting today. The Prime Minister needs to say today what he's going to do. There are 100,000 vacancies for drivers. There are shortages. So I say to the Prime Minister, we need a concrete plan today to deal with this problem, because otherwise this is going to go on till Christmas.
It is not just the fuel industry that has suffered due to the shortage of drivers. Across London last week, shelves in supermarkets were empty. In August, restaurant chain Nando's had to close 50 of its outlets due to a shortage of chicken. And fast food giant McDonald's was out of milkshakes. As a member of the European Union, the British had got used to having Europeans deliver their essentials. But after Brexit, the UK will have to recruit and train its own drivers. The Brits are learning how to live on their own, the hard way. Bureau Report, World is One.
The fuel crunch in England is being complemented by an energy crisis across Europe. Natural gas inventories are depleting, prices are skyrocketing, markets are nervous, and winter is coming. I know it sounds dramatic, but a lot depends on the weather, really. A harsh winter means a full-blown crisis, one that could deprive millions of their daily needs and slip several European economies into recession. We might even see them fight each other over natural gas. It is in alarmingly short supply, and the world needs it more than ever, especially colder regions like Europe. They need natural gas to power their industries, to keep their economies running, and to heat their homes. But there isn't enough gas to burn, and this crunch will get worse as the temperature drops. We'll discuss that in detail, but first let's tell you where things stand as of today. The wholesale cost of natural gas has surged to record highs in Europe, and the result is this: electricity prices are spiraling out of control. Where is this happening? In leading economies like the UK, France, Spain, Germany, and Italy, they're all suffering. They're all witnessing multi-year highs in prices. What's behind this crisis? Well, a lot of things. I could give you 4 reasons. First of all, economies coming out of the pandemic have doubled down on the use of resources. They're burning more fuel. Second, a cold spring depleted most natural gas inventories. Third, a calm summer slowed wind power generation. There wasn't enough wind to be turned into energy. And fourth, a touch of bad luck and politics that is making the situation worse. I'll explain all of this. Most of the European market, you see, relies on imported power. And the imports have hit many hurdles. Last week, there was a fire at an electrical interconnector that runs beneath the English Channel. It shut down a key power link between the UK and France. As a result, power supply was hit. Then a Northern Irish system sealed its exports due to domestic concerns. It further strained power supply to Europe. And then we have the Netherlands, Europe's largest onshore gas field. They've refused to boost production. They fear impending earthquakes, so they will not increase production despite the crunch. Now, all of these factors together have hit Europe. And European countries typically turn to Russia in situations like this. Russia meets a third of Europe's natural gas needs. Russia's state-owned natural gas company Gazprom does the heavy lifting. But supplies from Gazprom too have been lower than usual this time. Some say this is due to high domestic demand in Russia. Others fear that this is a deliberate market manipulation tactic by Moscow. Well, whatever be the case, Europe is feeling the heat and people are suffering. In Germany, the price of power has leaped 119%. In France, it has jumped 149%. In Spain, the increase has been 250%. In Britain, 298%, almost 300% jump in the cost of electricity. This is unprecedented. Industry observers say the situation could get worse with the onset of winter. A harsh winter means higher gas consumption. And if it gets very cold this winter, Europe is going to suffer more. Supply chains will be strained, prices will rise further, there will be more inflation, and governments are already warning of blackouts and factories being forced to shut down. This, of course, will have political implications, especially in countries that are going to polls. So what's the solution? With natural gas in short supply, can renewables fill the gap? Can wind and solar power meet the demand? Apparently they cannot. They may have become the leading source of energy, but they're still incapable of generating enough power to account for 100% of the demand in the months ahead. So where does that leave Europe? In the lap of luck, unfortunately. It can't fix the crisis with a magic wand. It will need long-term strategies to overcome this. Also, for all their promises of cutting down emissions, this winter, European countries are going to learn just how much their economies still depend on natural gas and how little they've done to overcome this dependency. Staying with Europe, there will be no dream swan song for Germany's Angela Merkel. Her party has narrowly been defeated in the national election. The centre-left Social Democrats have 10 seats more than Merkel's Christian Democratic Union. So who will be the Chancellor? Well, we'll have to wait and see. 2 parties have emerged as kingmakers in this election, the Greens and the Liberals. And these parties hold the key to Germany's chancellery. But as things stand, it's advantaged Social Democrats and their leader, Olaf Scholz.
Angela Merkel is out. And her party could soon follow. Germany's Social Democrats have secured a narrow victory. Their leader, Olaf Scholz, could be the new Chancellor. But celebrations will have to wait. Because the Social Democrats may have won, but they don't have a majority. So Germany could be in for months of intense political parleys. Scholz has called this a clear mandate. He wants Merkel's Conservatives to sit in the opposition. But does he have the numbers himself? Take a look. The Social Democrats have won 206 seats. The Conservatives 196. Then you have the Kingmakers. The Greens with 118 seats. And the Liberals with 92. Scholz sees a clear path to the Chancellery. An alliance of the Social Democrats, Greens and the Liberals.
The voters have spoken very clearly. They have said who should form the next government. They have strengthened three parties, the Social Democratic Party, the Greens and the FDP. And therefore that is the visible mandate that the citizens of this country have formulated, and that these three should lead the next government.
The numbers certainly check out. 416 seats in a house of 735 members. Just one problem. Cobbling this alliance will not be easy. The Greens and the Liberals were the big winners of this election. They swept the under 30 voters. But their agendas are quite different. Olaf Scholz will have a tough time finding common ground. His other big problem is this. The Greens and Liberals have a second option. The Conservatives themselves. As you can see, the numbers work for them as well. 406 out of 735 members. Conservative leader Armin Laschet isn't conceding defeat just yet.
For us, we can say that no party can read a mandate to govern for itself, to govern out of this result. Not even us. I don't claim first place, we are second. But a coalition is formed on the basis of factual matters and from the majority in the German parliament.
Here's the problem. This was the Conservatives' worst performance to date. Clearly, the mandate was against them, and the Greens and Liberals will be wary of that. After 16 years of stability, Germany is set for some turbulent times. Olaf Scholz is hoping for a government by Christmas. So, 3 months from now. 3 months of intense political talks and drama. Germany's next Chancellor will have a tough job. He must recalibrate the government's priorities based on this election. 15% votes for the Green Party and 11.5% for the Liberals, which means climate change and business are big agendas. The results also reaffirm Germany's largely centrist identity. Both far-left and far-right parties faced big losses. But the saddest person on election night, probably Angela Merkel. Not only did her party lose, she must now govern for another 3 months. Retirement or not, crises have a way of finding her. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Another UN General Assembly session has come to an end. They call it the Super Bowl of diplomacy. More than 100 world leaders flew into New York. Some of them sent video messages. There were speeches, there was drama, there were many disagreements. Is that what the UN has come to? A place to argue, a place to push your nefarious agendas? Where is the constructive dialogue? Where is compassion? Where are principles? Lost to the politics at the United Nations. I'll give you an example. The example of Myanmar. In February, their army staged a military coup. They toppled the elected government and put Aung San Suu Kyi under house arrest. That was 6 months back. And since then, we've seen protests, we've seen rebellions and armed insurgency against the army. Clearly, the people of Myanmar want democracy. What did the army do? What armies do best: brutally crack down on the people. Since the coup, 1,100 civilians have been killed in Myanmar. More than 8,000 have been arrested. What's their crime? Demanding democracy in their country. The people of Myanmar need international support. Their appeals must be heard. Unfortunately, the United Nations does not agree. Myanmar's representative was not allowed to speak at the UNGA. And just to be clear, he was not appointed by the military. He was nominated by Aung San Suu Kyi's elected government. So why is the UN stopping him? Initially, Myanmar was expected to address the general debate. Their turn was today, that is Monday, but politics interfered. There was a fight going on for Myanmar's UNGA seat. The military wants to send their own envoy, but the incumbent refuses to leave. He has applied for extending his tenure. Who resolves these disputes? The United Nations Accreditation Committee. It has 9 members, but the power lies with 3 of them: America, Russia, and China. Last week, these 3 countries reached an agreement on Myanmar. The current envoy can keep his seat as long as he does not address the UNGA. The pressure came from Russia and China, apparently. Their proposal was quite simple. If the ousted government wants to keep the seat, they must not address the UNGA. The others agreed. Myanmar's representative cancelled his address. This incident basically sums up everything that's wrong with the UN, specifically the United Nations Security Council. A group of 5 nations gets to decide the world's future. No consultations, no debate. They have the veto, just plain and simple politics. The UN was built to protect a rules-based order. But it's become a shouting match. They accuse, they respond, they leave. There is no action. Let me give you an example from last year. In March 2020, the UN Secretary General proposed a global ceasefire. This was peak pandemic time. The world could not handle a war and a pandemic. What did the UNSC do? They sat on the proposal for more than 3 months. 3 months to declare a ceasefire. Do you know why? Because everyone in the UNSC had a stake in those wars. Russia had plans in Ukraine and Syria. China was plotting against India and in the South China Sea. America was backing the Saudi coalition in Yemen. The result was this: more than 90 days to declare a ceasefire in the middle of a global pandemic. This is the reality of the United Nations Security Council. They take months to make a statement. And when they do, it's weak and non-binding. There were at least 8 coup attempts in 2021. Some were successful, like Myanmar and Mali. In all cases, the UNSC was a mute spectator, and I'm not advocating for gung-ho military action, but surely a statement of condemnation will not do. There must be sanctions, there must be embargoes, there must be diplomatic isolation, there must be some action, coercive action. Why doesn't the UNSC do any of this? Why do they speak for the Taliban and the Myanmar military? Because the Security Council is a failed group. America, Russia, and China bring their own agendas. In most cases, there is no consensus, even the slightest of disagreements, and they can use a veto. One vote, and the whole proposal is defeated. You see, the United Nations was built on a very ambitious assumption that powerful nations would pursue global good. Well, this lot does not. America has installed terrorists in Afghanistan. China is less of a country and more of a pirate. And Russia is busy jailing dissidents and faking elections. How can we break this deadlock? Through reform. The UNSC P5 are burnt out. They need fresh and enthusiastic members, countries that will enrich the United Nations Security Council, not through weapons and rhetoric, but with concrete ideas. Take India, for example, 17% of the world population, the world's largest democracy, hotspot of social diversity, world leader in climate change, space technology, vaccine manufacturing. What's the logic for keeping India out? Not just India, the likes of Germany, Japan, Brazil. These nations are shaping the world, but they are kept out of the United Nations Security Council. The fact is, the big boys do not want to change. They like the power, they like the exclusivity. And that is the biggest problem with the United Nations. We talk about reforms, but to enact those reforms, we need the same P5 members. UN agency chiefs act like stooges. They serve the P5, not the world, which is why the reforms debate has always been a dead end. The United Nations must ask itself this question: is it an organization for world good, or a place for the P5 to feed their egos? The answer to this question will be the key to the UN's future. The wrong answer could mean irrelevance. Now, I want to bring your attention to what's been happening in Afghanistan. For all their promises of making life easier for Afghans, the Taliban are undoing decades of progress made in the country. They've returned to their brutal tactics of the past. New diktats are being issued every week. They target every aspect of life in Afghanistan. In Kabul, a driving school for women has been forced to shut down. In Herat, they're forbidding girls from cycling on the streets. Universities are being forced to implement gender segregation policies. Thieves are being paraded with blackened faces. Salons have been barred from playing music, hairdressers have been banned from trimming beards, and dead bodies are being displayed at public places as a warning. A top Taliban leader has gone on record to say that executions, amputations, and many such brutal punishments will return to the country soon. Our next report tells you how the Taliban are taking Afghanistan back in time.
23-year-old Nilab Durrani is one of the few women driving instructors in Afghanistan. She runs the first of its kind driving school for women in the country. She launched it a year ago in Kabul and was planning to open another school this year. But her plans have now been dashed with the return of the Taliban.
Since the previous government collapsed, we have not registered a new student till now. And also, no one has contacted us to get registration.
In Herat, cyclist Sharara Sarwari had been training to compete abroad and represent her country on a global stage. After the Taliban took over the city, they seized her bike and those of her teammates. She now cycles around a courtyard on her brother's bike, too scared to go out on the streets.
Since I was a child, I was very interested in cycling. And in recent years, I have been working on cycling. But unfortunately, since the day Taliban came to power, all my dreams in terms of cycling have been reduced to zero. And I have no hope at all that one day I can compete abroad or represent Afghanistan as a cyclist.
Nilab Durrani and Sharara Swarari are just two faces of this story. Thousands of Afghan women have been forced to give up on their dreams in a similar manner. Some are fighting to break the shackles imposed on them. Others have simply given up, fearing for their lives. The Taliban's diktats, meanwhile, are getting more draconian with each passing day. On September the 18th, the Taliban ordered schools to reopen in the country, but barred women from returning. A diktat issued by the Education Ministry ordered male teachers and students to attend classes, but made no mention of women teachers or female students. Meanwhile, at universities in Kabul, a strict gender segregation policy is being imposed. The Taliban have banned co-education. They've asked women to attend classes behind curtains or simply go back to colleges in the provinces they came from. The diktats are not restricted to women. They target every aspect of life in Afghanistan. Take law and order, for example. A few days ago, the Taliban hanged 4 dead bodies at various public spots in Kabul. And this week, some images have emerged. They show 2 starving boys tied to a wooden post after they were accused of stealing bread to feed their families. In another part of the country, they blackened the face of a thief and put him on public display. And in yet another place, a thief caught stealing tires was presented with a tire necklace and paraded through the city. Are such punishments going to be the new norm in Afghanistan? They look like they will be, and on a much more brutal scale. Mullah Nuruddin Tarabi is in charge of prisons in the country and the chief enforcer of Islamic law, says that executions and amputations will return to the country and will have to be followed at any cost. He also warned the international community against interfering with these rules by saying, "Everyone criticized us for the punishments in the stadium, but we have never said anything about their laws and their punishments. No one will tell us what our laws should be." The diktats are as brutal as they are bizarre. In Afghanistan's Helmand province, the Taliban have banned hairdressers from shaving or trimming beards, saying that it breaches their interpretation of the Islamic law. They've also instructed salons to not play music or hymns. There are new diktats for foot soldiers too. Maulawi Muhammad Yaqub, the defense minister of the Taliban, has warned foot soldiers against taking selfies, wearing stylish clothes, or stepping out for sightseeing in Kabul. He has also asked them to improve their appearance by ensuring that their beards, hair and clothes are in line with Islamic rules. All these stories and developments signal a return to the Taliban's brutal tactics of their previous regime. Not only will they undo decades of progress made in the country, they will also take Afghanistan back in time. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Now let's talk about a volcano eruption that even the satellites in space cannot ignore. Last week, a volcano on the Spanish island of La Palma erupted. Hundreds of properties have been destroyed since, and thousands have been forced to leave their homes. But the worst may be yet to come. Eruptions from this volcano have intensified. Our next report tells you where this is heading.
It began last week. After 50 years, the Cumbre Vieja volcano erupted. Hot lava has been pouring down to residential areas in La Palma, destroying everything that comes in its way. More than 400 homes and several roads have been destroyed. Even a church was consumed by the fury of the volcano. Over 6,000 people were evacuated. The locals thought the worst is now over. That's when the eruptions intensified. A new vent on the volcano opened up. More lava and ash forced local authorities to ground air travel. The airport was briefly opened on Sunday, but all flights were cancelled. Experts on the ground feel the volcano could spew more lava and ash. The lava is 1,250 degrees hot. It is now approaching the seas. Reports say the lava could touch the Atlantic Ocean in the coming hours. That could trigger more explosions and send clouds of toxic gases over the islands. The situation in La Palma might scare the most of us. But the dangerous eruptions are drawing in some thrill-seeking tourists. Going by one report, hotels in La Palma are filling up. Prices for flights have shot up to 500 euros. That's more than $580. The tourists are coming in through ships too.
I come from Sweden. I arrived on Friday and I came with a one-way ticket to watch the volcano. It was one of my dreams. I've tried in Hawaii and Iceland, but I couldn't make it. A golden opportunity just presented itself, and here I am.
It's a bit shocking because people really see this as a spectacle. But it's a tragedy for all those people who lost their homes. And I also understand people's curiosity, that they want to come and watch it. But with the current situation, we don't even know how long it's going to last, or what it might become. I wouldn't dare to come from another island or another place.
These tourists could be coming in after listening to the Spanish tourism minister. Last week, he had encouraged them to travel to the islands on a radio show. Those comments have led to a wave of criticism against the minister. Bureau Report, World is One.
And with that, it's a wrap for us here in New York. It's been a privilege for us to broadcast this special edition of Gravitas from the United States. We hope you liked our coverage. Do share your feedback with us through social media with #Gravitas. We'll see you next time from our studios in New Delhi. Leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching. Have a good evening.